matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we are back online, and we are ready to give you people some precious, precious banter. Hi, Taylor.
Hello.
Welcome to Doomed to Fail.
Oh, you do it. You go.
No, I was welcoming you to your podcast. As is
Oh,
my
I thought you were. I
custom
thought you were
now.
doing our thing. Oh, thank you.
No.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome to you as well, and everyone else. Welcome to Doomed to Fail. We bring you history's most notorious disasters, epic failures, etc. twice a week. And I'm Taylor, joined by Fars.
And we are here talking and sharing stories about our weekend and what we're up to. And mostly busy but good, I think, is the way I'd wrap up the details there.
Everything? Yeah. Yeah. This is my last. I've, by some miracle, have no activities today besides this. I don't have any cookie booths. I don't have any softball games. All of that will change soon.
Enjoy it. Just enjoy the downtime.
I will.
Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and I just forgot. Did you already introduce us?
I just did.
Thank you. Okay. Man, I'm like really distracted. I think it's the number of screens I have and the number of tabs open on each screen. It's like my brain's just kind of like it's playing ping pong.
I'm like still frantically typing, and I'm thinking like maybe I should just dictate this to my outline instead of typing it, because my typing also is so bad because of my nails that like every other word is spelled wrong, but I'm like gonna try my best.
Can I see your nails again?
Mhm.
Okay, those aren't that bad. Like
Okay.
I mean that I've seen other women who have like ones that are like an inch or two off their fingers. And
No,
I'm
no,
like,
mine are
how do you
supposed to be. They're
type?
oh yeah. No, it's hard.
Okay.
They're kind of long. They're pretty long.
It seems like a hard thing to type with that.
I know, but I love having them do this.
Can't see it, but Taylor's doing a little finger.
They can hear it.
They can hear it.
Anyway.
Well, if you're still typing, do you want me to go first today?
No, I'm fine.
You're fine? Okay.
I'm done.
We'll go with Taylor's
I'm good
story.
enough. Good enough.
Good enough. That's our motto here at Doomed to Fail.
Good enough. So it's officially Women's History Month. Happy March 1st. I hung up my women's suffrage flag outside. It's huge. And I'm very excited. And I know that you started your women's history stuff earlier last week.
Taylor, can I tell you something that just dawned on me when you started talking?
What?
That I said I was going to do a series of 3, and I totally researched something different.
Okay, well, never mind for Pars's women's history. I will do mine. I will do 4. I'll do 4, maybe 5. But last year, as a reminder, I did Coco Chanel, who was a Nazi, Amelia Earhart, Henrietta Lacks, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, and Agatha Christie. So I did 5 last year. And this year, I'm going to start out with 2 classic women in women's history that I know you know and have heard of. And I'm not even going to make you guess because I don't really know whatever. I'm going to talk about Helen Keller and her teacher, Anne Sullivan.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So my children did not know who Helen Keller was, which if the Department of Education still exists, I'm going to write them a letter.
I think it'll get returned to sender.
They're going to be like, your typing is terrible. Also, we don't exist. So thanks for nothing.
Yes.
So, I read them a book about Helen Keller, and guess who wrote that book? I feel like I've told you this, but you're never going to guess.
Never going to guess.
Lorena Hickock, who is Eleanor Roosevelt's girlfriend, wrote a book about Helen Keller.
Yep,
We're like young adults. So I read that book
Well,
to
not
the
a yes.
children. I started to read a book about Anne Sullivan to the children, and Miles started to cry because her life was very sad, so I stopped reading that.
Man, your kids are going to be so interesting when they're adults.
They are. They definitely are. So Helen Adams Keller was born on June 27th, 1880. She lived in Tuscumbia, Alabama, and that was the South. It is the South, but it was the South in the 1880s, so just FYI. Her parents, Helene is her dad, Catherine Kate is her mom. The family home was called Ivy Green. It was a house that they've had for a long time, and it was probably, we could describe it as a plantation because they definitely had enslaved people, and her dad was a captain in the Confederate Army, and her grandpa was a general in the Confederate Army.
Can we just name our houses? Is that like just a thing that you can just choose to do?
Yeah, my house is named Rancho Relaxo. You know that.
I guess you do name your house.
I mean, my brother-in-law and his wife named they moved, but their first house they named Pembroke Manor for no reason. It was just great.
Okay, I'm gonna upload a picture of my house to ChatGPT and see if we can come up with a name.
Oh, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. Yeah,
Keep talking.
you should definitely name
I'll
your
share it with
house.
the audience at the end of this.
Yeah, everyone name your house. It's a good idea. So she had four siblings, two half brothers from her dad's first marriage, and then two siblings from her parents. They were part of the quote slave-holding elite, but things were rough post-war. So they did not have a lot of money after the war was over, because they could no longer, enslave people to make money. The In her book, when she wrote many, many books, but in Helen's book, when she talked about this part of her history, she said, quote, "There is no king who has not had a slave among his ancestors, and no slave who has not had a king among his." So, kind of talking about history and all of that. She is so smart. I'm gonna get to that. So that's her past. Lives in the American South post the Civil War. When she was 19 months old, she contracted probably meningitis or maybe scarlet fever, and that left her both deaf and blind, which is the main thing that you might know about Helen Keller.
It's
I
literally the
definitely,
only thing I know about Helen Keller.
right? The other thing, I saw something, with like that poor child this week who died of the measles in Texas and those measles outbreaks.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's going to be like not just death for those kids. Some of those kids are going to end up like severely disabled like this, you know?
Yeah, it's like the that we were talking about that guy who lived at the Iron Lung, one of
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
deals.
Right. So it's not just death, it's other things as well. So she obviously that's terrible. Having a 2-year-old who can no longer hear or see, like it's really, really difficult to communicate with that child. And her family kept good care of her, obviously. They kept her learning the best that she could. They would do like tactile games with her where she could like, put different things in different holes and like touch things and like understand space and like she could tell who was coming by their footsteps, but she didn't really know who they were, but she could tell that it was like different people by their footsteps. She had about 60 homemade signs, so like things that she could do to be like I want water or I want to eat or whatever. She would like make a movement and her family could understand her. She was able to communicate with their maid's daughter, which was a young girl who was only like 2 years older than Helen. Her name was Martha Washington, and they were able to like communicate like the way kids figured it out with like a little bit of like touching and moving and like trying to figure out how to do things, but nothing like formal, if that makes sense. Like however you'd figure it out.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, when you're a baby and you don't remember being a
I
baby.
totally remember. Yeah, yeah.
See, you don't. And the reason you don't, one of the reasons you don't remember being a baby is because you didn't know what you were doing because you were a baby. So you didn't have words for things. So any memory you have of then is like, would be, oh, I have this like feeling, I can see this like other thing that kind of looks like me coming towards me and giving me food. But you don't know the word for food. You don't know the word for mom. You don't like you don't know what those things are. You're kind of like in your brain figuring it out, you know? And that happens to everybody. But with
Yeah,
Helen,
it's like if you're born deaf, like you don't know what white is or blue is or
right, blind. But yeah, exactly.
wait,
Exactly.
what I say? Deaf?
Deaf. Yeah.
Damn it.
I did in this, I saw something else. I don't know if it was while I was researching this, but someone who was blind, they asked them what colors were, and they had like gone outside, and someone was like, that heat that you feel, that is red, and then like feel the grass and like the dew on the grass and when you feel plant, that's green. And like, just to kind of get an idea of it, but you don't ever have the full idea of like what people see or hear, you
Right.
know? So Helen's life until she was like 7 was in that space that you're in when you're a baby, when you're like, I don't know what things are. Like I know that there's people who take care of me. I know there's like stuff I like to eat, but I don't know what the word eat means. Just so many, she doesn't have the concept of what those things are. It's all in her head and it's like feelings. But a lot of the time, she's really frustrated too, because she can't communicate with anyone and they can't communicate with her,
It
obviously.
has to be tremendously frustrating to be in a situation where like literally nothing understands you.
Yeah. And like you don't even understand what's going on. You're sort of like just like this consciousness and like this is silent darkness, you know?
God, so
So
terrifying.
loud.
That's so
So
scary.
I know. I know. So Helen is obviously not the first person in the world to be both deaf and blind. There are plenty of other people before. In the United States, a famous woman who was born in 1829 was named Laura Bridgman, and she was a similar case. She learned to communicate doing using sign language and Braille, and she created beautiful art. She was a beautiful like lace maker, which is really cool. And Helen's mother, Kate, learned about Laura Bridgman from a book called American Notes by Charles Dickens. So Charles Dickens came to the United States and wrote some stories about the people here that he met, and one of those people was Laura Bridgman. So Kate read the story, and she went to Baltimore to the hospital where Laura Bridgman had been like evaluated, and she met a doctor named J. Julian Chisholm, and that doctor was working with Alexander Graham Bell, and they had Alexander Graham Bell meet Helen because he was working with deaf children
It was
for some reason.
again, nobody existed in the world back in the old days. It was like
Wild.
every. But did you say Martha Washington was her like friend?
Well, not the real Martha Washington.
Oh
Martha
yeah, it would have been
Washington
like
was the
100 years
yeah.
after this. Okay,
Martha
sorry.
Washington was the name of the formerly enslaved daughter of the person that she
Okay,
worked.
got it, got
If
it.
that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So she learned about this stuff. She met Alexander Graham Bell, and Alexander Graham Bell sent them to the Perkins School for the Blind, and that's where they met Anne Sullivan. So Anne Sullivan is the teacher. A lot of times in books, she's just called teacher, and she's also the miracle worker. So all the movies about her are called the miracle worker, like the one with Patty Duke. Do you know who Patty Duke is?
Nope.
So this is just to tell you and everyone else who Patty Duke is. She's an actress. She played a psychologist in the Baby Jessica movie that I watched on TV. But more importantly, she had a TV show when she was like a young teen called The Patty Duke Show, where she played herself and her cousin. And it was like about being identical cousins and like the stuff that could happen. So she played both parts and it was really cute. And then she played Helen Keller in the first Miracle Worker movie. And then later she played Anne Sullivan in the next one. So she played both parts.
How did you
And
know all that?
you know how also she's the mother of the guy who plays Sam in Lord of the Rings. And she died recently. So anyway, I used
You
to
have
watch it.
so much stuff crammed in your brain. It's
I
like
do.
good for
It's so
you, I
far.
guess.
Yeah, so far so useful.
Empty brain, having an empty brain. I will confess, having an empty brain is kind of nice because there's a lot of peace in there.
There's no peace in my brain. That's fair.
Clearly, clearly.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of movies about it. They're called The Miracle Worker. That's Anne Sullivan. She was born in 1866 in Feeding Hills, Massachusetts. When Anne Sullivan was young, she was really, really, really poor. And she got a disease called trachoma, which is a disease of your eyes that has to do with bad sanitary conditions. And essentially, it created like these hard modules on the inside of her eyelid, and her eyelids would scratch her eyes.
That is nightmare fuel.
It's horrible. So in the book that I got one chapter in before my son started to cry because it was too terrible, they were very clear that like the doctor didn't want to help her because she was poor. And he was like, "Oh, these poor immigrants, like they can't take care of their kids because her family was from Ireland and all this stuff." So she never got the treatment that she could have gotten. And so for the rest of her life, she's going to have very, very poor eyesight, and eventually she will be blind as well.
Why would you read this to Miles? Like,
Well,
what
it's
would
like a kid's,
what would
it was a kid's book. It was
you're
just like the
teaching
very
him like this like
beginning.
weird class social structure mixed with like torture? Like,
We're learning history in this house. Did you not think that we were?
I know, I know. It's just like that. Not everything has to be like no, no.
Well, we stopped reading it, but anyway, because she had a hard life. Her parents died young, and then her and her brother went to an institution and then to like foster care. But she ended up at the Perkins School for the Blind because they were able to help her. She's able to read Braille and do things, even though her eyesight would kind of go back and forth, and it would always hurt her. That
Got
makes
it,
sense, but
got it.
she worked there. So Anne, so yeah, so it was like scarring her eyelids, scarring her corneas, super terrible. She would get actually a ton of surgeries on her eyes, which is terrifying to think of like late 1800s eye surgery.
I'd rather just leave it alone. Just leave it alone.
I mean, you've heard how like LASIX can turn out so
Dude, I want to
terrible.
do it today. I want to like
Yeah,
I've been in a situation where somebody's recommended back surgery. I'm not going to do it.
no,
Like my back, my eyes. Like I'm not doing any of that. Like
yeah,
just live through it.
yeah. So she went through several surgeries, and at age 15, they were actually able to improve her vision so she could read books. She would later get more surgeries, and like at some point toward like the end of her life, she would beg for more surgeries. She just wanted to see. She ended up losing one of her eyes, so it was bad for Anne. But she worked so well with Helen because she understood what it was like to not be able to see in at least some capacity. And she really wanted to prove that she was more than her disability. And she wanted Helen to be able to prove that as well.
Wait, hold on
So,
1 second, Taylor.
mhm,
What year? When was this again?
the late 1880s.
Okay, so they discovered probably anesthesia 30 year earlier. I was imagining this woman being strapped down and then cutting into her
Well, I
eyeballs.
don't think, like, I feel like when you get LASIK, they don't numb your eyes, do they?
Oh God.
Oh, God, I
So
don't know.
well, I think what they do is they're eye drops, aren't they? They put eye drops in there,
Oh,
and eye
yeah,
drops,
probably.
yeah, and anesthesize your eyes.
I mean, it's a miracle that they got her eyesight better at one point in her life, you know?
She's probably lying. They probably stuffed a rock in her eye and said, "This is a replacement for your lens."
Oh,
No way,
God,
it
no.
worked.
It worked. It worked. So she worked at the Perkins School for the Blind, and she got assigned to work with Helen Keller. So on March 5th, 1887, Anne came to Helen's house to stay and to like meet with them. So she was paid by the Kellers, but they often didn't have enough money to pay her. So she would do her work for free, and they would eventually have like some benefactors and sponsors that would give them money, so that they could continue their work together. But when she got there, it was like really difficult. You have this child who's like essentially like partly feral. Like the family, they took good care of her, but they were like, Helen would at the dinner table, she would like walk around, just like grab food off people's plates. Like she didn't know what was going on. She just like, knew that she needed food. She knew that she like, needed to go to the bathroom, but she didn't really understand like what that was. And so Anne, like even in like the kids' books about her, Anne was rough with her. She would like slap her and be like, "You have to sit and do this." And she would make her like sit at a chair, wouldn't let her get up until she folded her napkin. And they would do that for like hours. And her parents would be like,
How?
"I don't know if I can do
Okay, so
this."
here's the part, Taylor, that always interested me about the Keller story, but that I never understood. How do you teach somebody that is blind and deaf anything? Like, how is
Right.
it even possible?
Well, so a lot of it is
Even
going to be
folding
like,
a napkin.
yeah, no, a lot of it is like repetitive things, and like just movements that she can do like with her hands, so she can like learn how to do it. So she does learn during this time. She learns like to crochet because she can like do that over and over again and like make a long chain with yarn. She learns how to like, clean things up and move things to different parts of the room because her spatial awareness is a lot better than everybody else's because she needs that, from like sound and touch and all the things. So she's able to do that. She also learns the manual alphabet, which will probably officially later turn into American Sign Language, but she doesn't know what it means. So she can make the alphabet. I can do my name. She can make the alphabet with her hands, but she doesn't know what it means, but she can repeat it. So if teacher like puts in her hand like this is a doll, DOLL, she can repeat that back to her.
Oh, that's how they do it. You put your hand on the hand of the person you're
Yeah,
teaching, and then they
yeah.
see how your fingers move, and
Yep.
then they repeat that. But then how do they know what that thing is?
Well, I'm going to tell you in a second.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting ahead. Go ahead.
No, you're not. Like that's a question. Like that's the thing. Like she can continue to repeat it and she can do it. And like when you watch, there's some movies that you can watch of Helen Keller when she's older doing it and they do it very fast. They spell into her hand, but like that's the best way for her to get information. So they're doing that. So like Anne bought her a doll, and so she's like doll in her hand and Helen can do it back, but she's like, I don't know what you want from me. Like later when she can express herself, she'll say like, I didn't know what she wanted. I could spell the word doll, but I didn't know what it was. Like, do you want me to just repeat what you're doing? Like, I'll do that, but like, I don't understand what we're doing. Just like you were saying, like, what do you do? Um, and so, oh, this is actually a quote from Helen Keller. She said, I did not know that I was spelling a word or even that words existed. I was simply making my fingers go in a monkey-like imitation. So that's what she's doing to start.
Wait,
But
so
she
how
didn't,
old was she again?
7.
It's kind of like us, isn't it? Like it's kind of like every other like when your parents are speaking. I mean, we're too young to know anything, but
Yeah,
when your parents are speaking to you, like you don't know
exactly.
anything. It's not that different. Okay, well, you put it in that context, or I did, but like still, I get it now.
No, yeah, that exactly. Like you need to learn what words are. Everyone needs to learn what words are one way or another, you
Right.
know? So eventually it clicks with one word, and you know what that word is? You know,
Water?
it's water. Correct. Correct. So they went out to the pump, which is like a water pump, old-timey water pump, and she's got a cup, and she has a cup, and she's blowing cup in her hand. She's blowing cup in her hand, and Helen drops the cup. She's so mad, like trying to figure it out. And then, quote from Helen. I stood still, my whole attention fixed upon the motions in her fingers. Suddenly, I felt a misty consciousness as of something forgotten, a thrill of returning thought, and somehow the mystery of language was revealed to me. I knew then that water meant the wonderful, cool something that was flowing over my hand. The living word awakened my soul, gave it light, hope, set it free. So I also think that she did the fact that she was able to see and hear for the first 19 months of her life probably helped as well.
Can you hear the barking?
No.
Okay. Yes, I'm sure it helped.
But so that was where they made that connection. So she was super excited, wanted to spell everything. Then she had to learn sentences and learn to express herself. But she did eventually learn all those things. Um, So that was super exciting. Her parents learned how to write in Braille to write her letters. They learned how to do the manual alphabet, the sign language to be able to talk to her. So she was able to start to learn things and actually communicate and learn. But Anne had to be with her the whole time. And so for the next few years, they would spend time at the Perkins School for the Blind, which is right outside of Boston. It still exists today. And they spend summers back home. And Helen she wanted to go to school. She wanted to learn more than just basic communication skills. And so when she was in school, it was hard because there weren't schools for both deaf and blind. Like that there were schools for blind kids, schools for deaf kids, but not both. And so that was what challenge are they gonna do? Um, a lot of the books, some are written in Braille, but not all of them. So when she went to school, Anne would and this would hurt her eyes the entire time, but she would read books and spell them word for word into Helen's hand. And then that's how then she would write reports on a typewriter.
Wait, so what would happen if you were deaf, blind, and had no hands?
I don't know.
Feet?
You could probably figure that out.
Sorry, continue.
No, that's a good question. I don't know.
It's not a good question, but
I
thank you
mean,
for trying.
I don't know. That sounds terrible. Even worse than this. Um, so Helen learned Braille. She could type on a regular typewriter. She could also type on a Braille typewriter. She learns at some point to read lips by touching them. So she could just put your hand in your mouth and know what you were saying. She would say that she could feel music by touching a piano and she could feel the vibrations and try to understand those things from that. She is, by the way, super famous during this time. She doesn't really know it. They didn't really tell her that she's super famous. People all over the world know her story and are really inspired by the fact that she was able to learn to communicate after all those hardships. People who sent her letters, and eventually she moves to New York to go to a school for the deaf, and then a finishing school in Massachusetts. And in 1900, she goes to Radcliffe, which is the ladies' Harvard, because she wasn't allowed to Harvard because she was a lady, but she goes to Radcliffe. And she also, during this time, is very determined to speak. So she does learn to speak, but it's very hard to understand her. I was like, maybe I could do it. And you can see her speak on YouTube, and it's hard. Um,
Yeah, of
but
course. She's never heard the
yeah,
words.
but she speaks, and then whoever her companion is with her will kind of translate after she speaks. But it's super cool, to see her trying. Um, she graduated in 1904 from Radcliffe, and she did things like her final exams. She would sit alone in a room with a typewriter and type out the answers, so that she would be able to write her final reports in a way that was showing that she was doing it,
Right, right.
Her college was paid for by the Standard Oil family. They heard about her from their friend Mark Twain, and he asked them to pay for her
There's
college, and they
literally
did.
nobody in the world. It's just all the famous
She
ones. You
knows
know all of
everyone.
them.
Yeah. So then her question was what to do next. So she did write a book, kind of right away. Her first book was called The Story of My Life, and that was a bestseller. It's in a million languages all over the world. She had trouble though making money, and at first she turned down, but then later accepted a pension from Andrew Carnegie. So Andrew Carnegie paid her some money for the rest of her life,
It's got to be
just
a
to like
good
live.
hookup.
Yeah. So in the night, so some of the things that happened to her, at one point there's a story where like her house catches on fire and she escapes because her dog warns her, which is really sweet. He like starts licking her like crazy and she's like, what is going on? But she can't hear anything or see anything, and she eventually smells the fire and gets out, but her dog saved her life.
Dogs are
Just
amazing.
very cute. In the 1910s, she traveled all around the US, and she didn't just talk about disability advocacy. She also talked about women's right to vote, workers' right, and socialism. So she was a socialist and would talk about equality and things like that all the time. Her eyes started to get actually infected because her eyes like still existed, and her left eye started to get very swollen. So in 1911, her eyes were replaced by glass eyes. So both of her eyes were taken out. She also did, her and Anne would do vaudeville acts, which people were like feeling that that was like beneath her, but she was like, I have to make money somehow. So she would travel around the country and get introduced as Helen Keller, and the audience would ask her questions, and then Anne Sullivan would spell them into her hand, and she would answer them, and people loved it. They loved seeing her. They were really inspired that she was out there working and having a job. She spoke all over the US and in over 25 countries. By the end of her life, she traveled all over the world. At one point, Anne married a dude named John Macy. He kind of disappears. I don't really know what happens to him. Like they don't get divorced, but he disappears at some point. And they find another person to join them, a woman named Polly Thompson in 1914. So Polly was from Scotland and she was an immigrant and she was just like excited to help. She didn't have any experience working with the deaf or the blind or both, but she joined them and would stay with them for the rest of her life. In 1914, Anne got sick and they sent her to Puerto Rico to help her feel better, which sounds great, but it did not work. And she would go blind as well. And she died in 1936. So she was sick for like the last bit of her life with Helen by her side. There's one mention about Helen being secretly engaged to a reporter, but it didn't end in marriage. So she might have like had a someone who like cared about her that way at one point in her life. But we don't know any details. So while Polly was there, who was the second girl who came to take care of her, they traveled all over the world. In 1916, she spoke against war. She had a speech called Strike Against War that condemned World War I. She hated Wilson, which is fair. She got an FBI file because of that, because of her like anti-war advocacy. She would travel around and give speeches about how a lot of people who became blind because of like circumstances, like living in a place where you could get a disease, like Anne did, or a lot of women in some places were or and men were blind because of syphilis. So it's like these things that happened and made you blind, but it had to do with your status and like living in poverty. So she would talk about how to like help those people as well. She did a speech at a place called the Lions Club International, and she urged them to take up the case of blindness prevention, and they still do that today. They are one of the leading organizations in the world that helps screenings and help people with eye health, which is cool. Um, Eventually, she would travel post World War II to Japan and work with the blind in Nagasaki and Hiroshima because a lot of people were blinded by the bombs. So she would talk about how the government can help them and that kind of thing going forward.
It's terrible.
I know. She was, there's one kind of not, there's one not good thing that she supported eugenics. Basically, like kids who were disabled, and she thought we shouldn't waste our time spending helping them, kids who were like very disabled from birth,
She
and that
was disabled.
but not from birth and like as a whole different thing.
Oh,
Which is,
come on.
it's
You're splitting hairs now.
no, I'm not defending her. I'm just telling
Okay.
you.
Fine.
I'm telling you that's one of the things that she had said. And that she also talked about like overpopulation, and wanted people to have less kids. I don't know why that was something that she cared
There
about,
was
but
like
that's what she supported.
17 people in the United States at that time.
So there's that. And she also like became religious, at some point with kind of her own. She was Baptist eventually. She called herself like a world citizen, like traveling around the world. When she was 75 in 1955, she did a 40,000 mile, 5 month tour of Asia. So all around the Asian countries to talk to people there. She knew several languages, so she could read in like German and French as well as English. She wrote about 14 books, some of them about her life. And she played herself in a movie that you can watch on YouTube that is really cool. It's like just her showing you what she does like throughout the day and like living with Polly and like she'll like, get up and she'll make the coffee and she'll bring it on a tray up to Polly's room and like hand it to her and they'll do it together. And then they're like at one point like Helen is um like polishing the silver at the table and Polly is doing the dishes and then Polly knocks on the table and Helen gets up and starts drying the dishes. So they had like a way to like live together and be able to like do those things together. Um, both the book by Lorena Hickock and the movie about her in that she plays herself, they both end with her reading the Bible in bed, like in Braille, which is like weird, but okay. That's like a big thing that they had at the end of that. And Helen would have a couple strokes in her later life in the 1960s, and as she got older, she didn't travel anymore. She got the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Lyndon Johnson, and she's in the National Women's Hall of Fame, and she died in her sleep on June 1st, 1968, in Connecticut. Her home was called Arcan Ridge, if you want to know the name of her house. That was the name of it. Um, she was 87.
A long life.
hmm Her ashes are buried at the Washington National Cathedral next to Anne Sullivan and Polly Thompson. So the three of them are together in DC.
Very interesting.
I know.
Yeah, that's a very. I'm glad you told that story because I should know her story and I did not. So now I
It's
do.
cool. It's really interesting. It's interesting that she, did more than most people do in her
She
life,
she's definitely accomplished more than I ever will.
and like even with all of that, I think, there was some other um a young man who had the same condition that she had raised money for at some point when she was younger. She was like, let's give this guy money. And they helped him, but like he was able to get a job at a cardboard box factory and like live his life like very simply. And I'm like, that seems like most people. That's like the best case scenario, you know?
Yeah, under any circumstance,
Yeah.
it's a bell curve.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Helen Keller was on one side, Box Man was on the other side.
Yeah. I feel like he's like even in the middle and then like the
Actually,
other
he's in
side's
the
just like
middle. You're right.
nothing.
You're right.
Yeah.
He's in the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah. So she definitely went above and beyond for everything that had happened to her. And it's cool. I recommend looking up her movies on YouTube because it's cool to see her like move around and she's always smiling and she looks like an old lady in the 50s and 60s, but she's Helen Keller, which is cool.
She lived later than I thought she lived. I would have assumed Helen Keller died in the 1800s, but
Yeah.
you said 1968, I think.
Yeah, 1968. Yeah.
So,
So yeah, it's super interesting. It's interesting to hear how she even did anything, and then like had opinions that were like, you know, political and traveled around and did all those things. And like, I think it's fun to think of her like in Japan trying sushi, you
I,
know?
I like that she's like anti-war, but then also pro-eugenics. Because it's like,
I know.
oh, so she probably didn't want to go to war with Hitler.
We contain multitudes. No, she
Multitudes.
didn't. She did want to go to war with Hitler, but but I think that there's like she was like a spectrum because she also like donated money to the NAACP and, helps to found the American Civil Liberties Union, so like it's all sorts of stuff.
Like we've always discussed, like there's no such thing as like pure good, pure evil. Like
Exactly.
it's all a spectrum.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. So, yeah, she like, you know, I I'm just like kind of reading my notes and like, her and Mark Twain were both considered to be like leftist radicals because they were socialists and things like that. So, all sorts of
Interesting.
interesting complex things when you live a whole life and when you write it all down. It's
Also, I
interesting.
wonder, yeah, I guess at that point, I guess in their timeline, they never saw socialism. So it's just like a thought experiment for them, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. Either way, very cool, very fun. Thanks for sharing that. And are you going to tell us who the rest of your stories are going to be about, or not?
No,
Not quite yet. Okay,
not yet, not yet. But I will get to them in the
fair
following weeks.
enough. Any predictions for the Oscars? Oh, are we watching it, or I'm not?
What? Why would you watch it? You just did a whole episode
I
about how you
know, I
hate
know.
those
The second I
things.
said that, I was like, ugh.
No, but do you remember Sally, who we used to work with?
Oh yeah,
So she every year does an Oscars contest, and I do it every year. So and I never watch the movies, but you just like rank choice the ones that you like, and then and you might win, but you don't win anything. It's just like whatever. So it's like her and all of her friends, and so I did fill out her email form, and I just put like, I want this person to win because they're cute, stuff like that. It's just fun.
Speaking of movies, I saw The Monkey.
Oh, did you tell me? Did you text me about that today?
I texted you about it today.
Got it.
It is so fun, Taylor. It's fun. It's funny. It's like Final Destination or Saw in terms of just like graphic violence, but like in a comedic way. It's executed very funnily.
I've read. Oh my God, I didn't know that Oz Perkins did it. I love him.
Yeah, he
Um,
did. He did Long Legs too.
I know. I know he did Long Legs. And he did my favorite movie, I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in This House. I love him. I mean, I've read the obviously I've read the story, The Monkey by Stephen King.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This was. I'm absolutely gonna go see it again.
Oh my God, Elijah Wood is in it. That's cool.
He is a very very brief cameo.
Yeah, that could look cool. I definitely want to see it.
Sweet. Alrighty. Cool. Anything to read out from the audience?
Yes, we got someone who asked us about our stickers.
Why is that a big deal? We get asked that 17 times a day.
Oh my gosh, bless your heart. Um, it's Rebecca. Was that right? Yes, Rebecca. Thank you so much. This email was so sweet. She was like, if they're all gone, it's totally fine. And I was like, girl, you are the first and only person to take us up on this free sticker
Stop.
offer.
Stop, Taylor. You gotta
Well, if
stop
that's what's
it.
stopping people, if people are like, no, I'm nervous because because I'm afraid that you run out of them. We have not. We have not run out. If you'd like some Doomed to Fail stickers, send us your address, doomedtofellpod@gmail.com. We have a lot of them.
You also get a personalized note
Yeah,
by
do it.
Taylor. I messaged Taylor and was like, "Oh, I have some stickers. I'll mail one out too." Like, how do you mail things? Like, do I
No,
just
you were
put?
like, do I use a stamp? I'm like, oh my God, just,
I was like,
oh
do I need to weigh the envelope and then someone tells me how many stamps I put on the envelope? I'm not a mail things.
my God. You're like the Weasleys. Do you remember that when the Weasleys do that? Do
No.
you, in Harry Potter, the Weasleys send something to Harry Potter and they cover it in stamps because they don't know how to
Yeah,
use
I remember
stamps.
this. Yeah, you're right. You're
It's
right.
like really funny. And I think whenever I don't know what to do, I feel like a Weasley. I'm like, I don't know. I just put a bunch of stamps on this, which is stupid. But thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate you very much. And if anyone else with a sticker, send us an email. I'll mail it to you.
Sweet.
Got nothing but time.
Yes. Anything else, Taylor?
No. All the socials, Doomed to Fail Pod. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you.
Sweet. Boom.
Sweet.
We appreciate you. See you in a few days. Bye.